Ever wish you could just hit add to cart without doing that whole budget breakdown in your head?
Oh, tell me about it.
Right. That's kind of why we're diving into budgeting today. Not the restrictive kind, though. The kind that helps you actually afford more of the stuff you love.
Now, that's a concept I can get behind.
Exactly. So we're going to be digging into a popular podcast episode. It lays out the basics of budgeting in a really interesting way. Think of it like your personal finance game plan.
Okay, love that.
And to help us unpack it all, we've got a real money expert with us. They've helped tons of people totally change how they think about their finances. And the best part is, they make budgeting feel less like a chore and more like, well, designing your own financial adventure.
I like where you're going with this.
Right. What I found really cool about this episode we're looking at is how much it emphasizes awareness.
It's so true. Budgeting isn't about like locking your money away. It's about knowing where it's actually going in the first place.
Yeah.
Kind of like if you're going on a road trip without GPS, you're just driving aimlessly, probably going to get lost, definitely going to be stressed. A budget's like that GPS for your money.
Oh, I like that analogy. Because seriously, who hasn't looked at their bank account at the end of the month and been like, wait, how did that happen?
Every single month.
Right. So where do we even start with building this whole budget GPS thing? What should we be mapping out?
So it all starts with understanding your cash flow, right? Like the podcast host made this point, it's about becoming a financial detective.
Ooh, I love a good mystery.
Right. You got to know exactly how much is coming in and exactly where it's going every single month.
Okay, so time to channel our inner Sherlock Holmes, but instead of magnifying glasses, we're talking spreadsheets and highlighters.
Basically. And that means tracking every single dollar. Rent, bills, groceries, even those, those little impulse buys, it all adds up.
Oh yeah, those definitely count.
Absolutely. Don't leave anything out, even if it seems small. Like, you can use apps if you're into that. Mint is great. It connects right to your accounts. Or you need a budget YNet, like all the cool kids call it. But honestly, even a good old-fashioned notebook does the trick. The real key is consistency.
And speaking of consistency, one thing that stuck with me from the podcast was how important it is to categorize everything. It's not just about knowing you bought coffee. It's about knowing how much went to your daily latte versus, say, brunch with your friends last weekend.
Yes. Categorizing helps you see the bigger picture, Like, You've got fixed expenses, rent, car payments, that kind of stuff. Those usually stay pretty much the same every month. And then you've got those variable expenses, groceries, eating out.
Oh, yeah.
Which, let's be real, those can be all over the place.
Especially if you're like me and easily tempted by shiny new restaurants.
I feel that.
But this is where it gets really interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because once we've tracked everything, categorized it all,
Yeah.
then we get to decide where we actually want our money to go.
Exactly.
And that's where the magic happens.
It's like you're in the driver's seat now, right?
Totally. So how do we even begin prioritizing all this stuff? Are we breaking out the vision boards?
I mean, hey, whatever works. But nah, it's really about good old-fashioned planning. This episode, the host had a really cool point about treating your savings goals and debt payments, like almost like they're bills,
Right. Got to pay yourself first.
Exactly. And I actually started using a separate savings account for my goals, like travel or that down payment I'm saving for.
Ooh, very responsible.
And I set up automatic transfers every month, just like they were bills coming due, and honestly, game changer.
Right. It makes it so much easier.
Mm.
And speaking of easy, the podcast also talked about some common budgeting pitfalls. Like, we know we got to track expenses, but what else trips people up even when they're trying to budget well?
Oh, for sure. One thing is people underestimate those small expenses, like getting coffee every day or buying lunch, those streaming subscriptions we all have.
Those definitely add up faster than I'd like to admit.
Right. And they seem so small on their own, but the podcast host actually told this story. They realized they were spending like $500 a year on gum.
Wait, what? Just on gum? Okay, that's impressive, actually.
Right. And it's those little things. It's why tracking everything is so important, especially when you're first starting out. Another thing that can trip people up is setting like crazy high expectations.
Yeah, going from 0 to 60 with your budget overnight is probably not the best plan.
Totally. It's about finding a balance. You don't want to feel like your budget is punishing you,
Right, because then you're just setting yourself up for failure.
Exactly. It's got to be sustainable long term. That's why the podcast was talking about making sure to include like fun money in your budget.
Yeah, you can't forget about treating yourself sometimes.
Absolutely. Because like a budget should help you enjoy your life more, not less. Right?
That's the goal.
Right. And something else about building a budget. It's great to make a detailed plan, but don't just set it and forget it.
Oh, that's good advice.
Because life happens, right? Your income might change, your goals might change. You got to review and tweak things as you go to make sure it's still working for you. It's a living document.
It's like when you go on a road trip, sometimes you have to take a detour.
Exactly. Your budget needs that flexibility too. And hey, speaking of tools, any other recommendations for folks who are ready to get organized?
Lay 'em at us.
Well, we talked about Mint and YNB. Those are great. But you know what else is super helpful? A good old-fashioned spreadsheet.
Classic.
Right. Or even, a notebook if that's more your style.
I am a sucker for a good notebook.
Right. Find a system that works for you.
Exactly. So out of all this, I'm curious, what's one thing you wish you'd known about managing money, way back when? Besides the dangers of impulse gum purchases, of course.
Ooh, good question. I used to think I was pretty good with money, but then I discovered sinking funds.
Okay, sinking funds. Sounds a little dramatic. Are we talking like burying cash in the backyard or something?
Not quite. But a sinking fund is basically, it's like you set aside a little bit of money every month, specifically for those bigger expenses, are coming up later in the year.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah, like holiday gifts or car maintenance, maybe even a vacation.
So you're not scrambling at the last minute when those things pop up.
Exactly.
Smart. It's like next level budgeting. I like it.
Right. It really does make those bigger expenses feel less scary. Speaking of feeling empowered, for anyone listening who's ready to jump into all this budgeting stuff and really feel that I'm in control feeling, what's like one thing they could do today just to get started?
Honestly, through this whole deep dive, one thing keeps coming back to me.
Yeah.
And it seems so simple, but it makes such a difference. It's all about awareness.
Yeah.
Like, that's really where it all begins. We can talk about categories and prioritizing all day long, but if you don't actually know where your money's going in the first place.
Right. Got to have that foundation.
Exactly. So if you're listening and ready to take that first step, track your expenses for a week.
Yeah.
Seriously, write down every dollar that goes out. Coffee, that taxi you took, even that random online purchase.
See what you find. Yeah.
Yes. You might be surprised.
And it's not about judgment. It's about information.
Exactly.
Once you have that information, then you can make choices that actually reflect what matters to you.
Yes. It's about taking control of your story. So as you go about your day, we'll leave you with this. What one small change can you make in your spending today to, free up a little cash for something that really matters to you? Remember, this isn't about deprivation. It's about aligning your spending with the things you actually care about. Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.